And this is our nutrition webinar team. We've got from left to right, we've got Dr. Wendy Dahl, Wendy Lynch, that's me, Julie England, and Jamila Lepore. So take a look at the gray box to go over a few features for the webinar. If you notice that your gray box keeps disappearing, if you look in the top left-hand corner of that box, there's a red arrow. You can right-click on that, and it will help disable that auto hide feature. Also, about midway, you're going to see the materials box. If you haven't already downloaded the materials, take a few minutes to download that before we move into the presentation today. And at the bottom, or it depends on how yours are organized in your gray box, but somewhere in that gray box you're going to find a chat feature, which we highly encourage questions and participation throughout the webinar. There is a drop-down arrow that allows you to send a private message to an individual that's participating or one of the speakers, or if you want to send it out to the entire group. And at the close of today's webinar, you will receive a short online evaluation, and of course your feedback is very important to us. We use this information not only to enhance the webinars, but also for future planning or planning for future topics. And now it's time to overcome information overload and discover the nutrition essentials you need.
Thank you, Wendy. So this is Jamila, and I will be presenting to you the first half of our presentation and then handing it over to Julie. She was finally able to join us, so she will be doing the second half. So I wanted to start out the conversation with a question. So where do you typically get your nutrition and health information? And just type in the chat box for us. Are you getting it online, in the media, friends and family? Where are you getting your information? So classes, reading, extension office, the internet, yep, cooking shows, so television. Books, online, lots of people saying extension. We must have some extension agents in here, at least people that are familiar with what we do. Okay, and the reason that I'm asking that is really kind of the basis for this presentation. There's so much information that we're bombarded with, and it comes from so many different sources. You know, and you guys covered many of these. We get information from, and nutrition and health information, I should say. We're getting this from the media, from friends and family, physicians. There's bloggers writing about things now. Journals, universities, people claiming to be experts. That's why I put that in quotations. We even have information from our own personal experience, and as well as government and companies. So everyone of those sources is going to have a different, come to the table with a little bit different outlook. And so it's really kind of trying to figure out which one of these sources is reliable versus not reliable when it comes to figuring out information for ourselves. And I think for most people, it's probably obvious that when you're trying to find nutrition and health information, the best sources, of course, are going to be health professionals, so your physicians, your registered dietitians, as well as universities, so things like the extension office or even the university itself. The government also is going to put out unbiased information, and so those will be your reliable sources. The ones that you have to question a little bit more, it doesn't mean that they're not reliable, you just don't know for sure, might be something like a blogger. A blogger may have personal experience with a diet and be giving out nutrition advice, and you don't really know as a consumer whether or not that information is reality or it's based on just their personal experience and is anecdotal. It's not something that's actually grounded in research. So for those kind of sources, I think it's better to use them. You know, someone mentioned cooking shows. It's kind of the same thing. It's better to use that more for things like recipes or cooking tips as opposed to actually getting your nutrition and health information from those sources. So I'm going to present to you guys pretty much some of the hot topics and sort of the trying to figure out, but how do I want to say this? Trying to explain a little bit about the things that you really need to know with calories and the macronutrients, the carbs, the fat, the protein, as well as micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals. And just because we get so much information on those specific nutrients, what do you really need to know, and what's the truth? What's going on right now? So what is a calorie? Well, the definition is the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of a liter of water 1 degree. And this is according to the Dietary Guidelines. But what that really means is just the energy that we take in, so the food that we eat, the food we consume, the beverages as well, and the energy we expend. So if we just think it's a transfer of energy, it's the calories in and the calories out. And what determines how many calories we need? Well, there's a lot of people that will debate this, but really there's so many factors that determine what we need, and that's why a lot of times if you see a standard diet that has a number and they say, this is what you need, it's really not taking into account you as an individual. First of all, there's the individual factors you have, so your age, your gender, your weight, how active you are. If you're more active, you're going to need more calories. Your genetics, unfortunately, we just are born with a certain metabolism based on what our parents have. We can change that by adjusting things like our activity level and our weight, but at the end of the day, you're also pretty much started, it's what you start with, so you can't really change your genetics. If you have any medical conditions, some medical conditions require more calories, some require less. Your body composition, people who are more muscular are going to need more calories, and even life cycle stages. So for someone who's pregnant or breastfeeding, they're going to need a lot more calories because they're nourishing a second human. So those are things that some of those we can control, some of those we can't, but those are factors that will influence our calorie needs. And the other really big one that is often neglected is really, what is your goal? When it comes to weight, which I think is really a common goal for many people, are you trying to lose weight, gain weight, or stay the same? With your activity, are you trying to improve performance? Say you're running a marathon and you want to improve your time. You may need more calories and you may need them from certain sources. And then health. Are you trying to fight a certain disease or manage a certain disease? And some of those can affect how many calories you actually need. So this is a question I get often, and that's why I wanted to include this here. Is a calorie a calorie? Well, like most things in nutrition, the answer really is it depends. And we want to know, are you looking for calories for health reasons or simply to adjust your weight, either up or down? For most people, it's probably down, but there are people who are trying to gain weight. So when it comes to purely weight issues, whether that's losing, maintaining, or gaining, for all intensive purposes, yes, a calorie is just a calorie. But what I want to point out here is that just because you can lose weight on a low-calorie diet with less nutritious foods does not mean it's optimal or recommended. And one thing that people will contest here is that protein actually burns more calories than carbs or fat. And while technically that's true, it does take more energy to burn, to digest the protein than carbohydrates or fat. The difference is negligible on overall caloric expenditure. So you may be saving, and I can't really give a number, but just a few extra calories a day by having more protein. So it really doesn't make a difference in the long run on overall caloric expenditure. So like I said, when it comes to weight, a calorie is a calorie. But again, it's not necessarily optimal or recommended. And when it comes to health, quantity and quality matters. It really does matter where your calories are coming from and what foods you're choosing. And really, I think it's important to have health as your priority first and weight secondarily. If you want to lose weight, you still can prioritize health and lose weight. You don't have to, health doesn't have to be sacrificed in order to have weight loss. And this is just, I wish the slide was a little bit better. It's kind of blurry, but hopefully you can see it okay. There's lots of images like this online, but many of them are copyrighted, so I could only use this one. And we'll have to maybe come up with our own slide of showing this a little bit nicer. But the point is, it's showing 100 calories of different types of foods. And basically, if you look at the fruits and vegetables, the carrots, the apple, the tomato, you get a lot more volume of food, which is going to be more satisfying than if you were to choose the same amount of calories of something like candy or even sugar in your coffee. You don't get as much bang for your buck. Protein. So I'm sure you've all seen protein is pretty much everywhere nowadays. It's all over the media, it's all over our packages and the food in the supermarket, and it can be kind of confusing. It's sort of the presented as this, miracle nutrient. It hasn't been demonized like carbohydrates and fat have. So let's just start out with defining protein. So protein is what I like to call the foundation. It's the building blocks for many things in our body. It's for growth, development, maintenance of body tissues, and it's only about 4 calories a gram. We need it for several functions. We need it for the structure of our bone and our muscles, and also to assist in many body reactions. Protein is something that is essential. We have protein's made up of amino acids, and we have non-essential amino acids and essential amino acids. So the non-essential amino acids are those that our body can make on its own, but the essential ones must come from diet. And so what that means is you have to consume protein in order to get these amino acids into your body. And if you don't, then you could end up with a deficiency and have issues going on. It may not be depending on what the amino acid is that you're not consuming, it can affect some of these body reactions or even our bones and our muscles. So it's really important that we get protein so that we are getting these essential nutrients. So where do we find protein? Well, these are the main sources of protein that are listed on the Dietary Guidelines. Most of us know that it's found in meat and poultry and seafood. It's also in eggs. There's a little bit of protein in beans and peas, nuts, seeds, and dairy. Not as much as there will be in the meat, poultry, and seafood, but those are good options for people who don't eat those things. And then soy products, so things like tofu or even anything that's really made with some sort of soybean. And those are usually the vegetarian alternatives. So how much protein do we actually need? So the RDA is the recommended daily allowance, and we have an RDA for all of the macronutrients, and it's basically 0.8 to 1 grams per kilogram a day. And a kilo is about 2.2 pounds, so you can just do that conversion. And that equates to about 10 to 25% of our total calories. So that seems pretty low. And the thing is with the RDA is that it's really it's a minimum recommendation when it comes to protein. How much each of us actually needs individually and what is optimal will depend on various factors. So for instance, higher protein is important for women who are pregnant, as well as athletes and older adults. And so they may need a higher end than what the RDA is saying. I see a question in the chat box. Is that in reference to body weight? Yes. So it's 0.8 to 1 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. So great question. And another factor that's influencing our needs so higher protein may be needed for those groups, but there's some people that actually need lower protein. If you have a certain stage of chronic kidney disease or the medical condition PKU, where you can't process the amino acid phenylalanine, which is in many protein products, or protein foods, I should say. And so you have to limit your protein for those purposes. Like I said, the RDA is really the minimum, and research shows that for healthy individuals who are controlling calories, higher protein diets, so in the range of 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram, or about 25 to 35% total calories, may have additional benefits. But we're going to go over this in the next slide. Okay, so moderate protein, which is the 0.8 to 1 grams, that's the RDA we just mentioned, this meets the basic health needs for most people. There's been a lot of interest in looking at high protein diets, which, as I said, is really looking, it's about 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram a day. And they've found several different things, but there are sort of some caveats with each of these. So one thing is that with a higher protein diet, there is increased thermogenesis. And I sort of alluded to this in the beginning in talking about that protein is going to burn more calories than digesting carbohydrates or fat. But as I mentioned, the effect is really probably too small to impact weight loss in the short term. It may be beneficial in the long term, but the research is still minimal and we don't really know. Another thing is that it might have a greater impact on fat loss when calorie controlled. So that is a key point here. The difference is really observed with protein regardless of whether carbs or fat are restricted. So really the main focus here is on the protein being high in a calorie controlled. It really doesn't matter whether it's carbs or fat that are high or low. And this kind of begs the question with the whole low carb, low fat controversy. I think the question really needs to be, is there sufficient protein and is it calorie controlled, not how many carbs or how many fats are in the diet. The third point is that a high protein diet might also increase satiety when compared to low protein diets. And for someone who is on a diet, this might help them stick with a reduced calorie diet for the long term because it's more satisfying. And that pretty much goes with the final point as well. It might decrease subsequent energy intake at the next meal. So basically, because it's more satiating, it means that you may consume less food or less calories at your next meal. So it can help you control calories in that way. But can you get too much protein? So yes and no. It, again, kind of depends on the person as well as the rest of the diet. So there are certain medical conditions like diabetes and especially kidney disease, among others. And these individuals do need to use caution when proceeding with a high protein intake. And I do want to make the point here too that anytime you want to make any change to your diet, you always need to discuss it with a qualified health professional. So just make sure we have that disclaimer in there. The research does show that for healthy individuals who do not have medical conditions, that protein intakes as high as 2.8 grams per kilogram do not have an adverse effect on the kidneys. However, again, there's lots of other issues that you could look at, such as the practicality of it and are they getting enough vitamins and minerals from other foods and such. So there are other things to consider. Again, it's just because it's not negative doesn't necessarily mean it's optimal, and that's what we want. We want to have optimal food choices. And finally, protein is not this magical nutrient that you can just consume as much as you want. Just like carbs and fat, if you consume too many calories, even in the form of protein, your body is going to use that to make you gain weight. So even someone was consuming 100% protein, if they're consuming too many calories, they're still going to gain weight. I do not recommend that, by the way. Okay, carbohydrate. This is a very contested one in our media right now. So defining carbs. So carbs are what I call the fuel. And this is because it's basically the preferred energy source for our body processes. It helps us maintain body temperature, regulates our heartbeat, helps digest food, fuels our muscles, and like protein, it's also 4 calories per gram. And carbohydrates are made up of monosaccharides and disaccharides, as well as polysaccharides, fiber, and glycogen. And so these are just the different types of carbohydrates. So the mono and disaccharides are basically what we would call the simple sugars. Our body uses glucose as fuel, and so most of the carbohydrates are going to break down into glucose or fructose. And the disaccharides would be table sugar. So any sort of sweetener that you're using is going to have the disaccharides in it. And that includes even things like honey and agave. Those are going to have those simple sugars. Polysaccharides are the complex carbohydrates, and those usually also have fiber, but not always. Fiber is considered a carbohydrate, even though it is not the 4 calories per gram like we said with the other ones. It's actually pretty negligible. Some of them, it's anywhere from 0 to 1, pretty much, depending on the fiber. And then glycogen is the storage form of carbohydrate. So just like with protein, if we are not using the carbohydrate for energy, then our body, and we have extra, then we're going to store it as glycogen. And then if we are maxed out on our glycogen stores, then the rest of that is going to be excess calories, which will then be converted to fat. So it's, again, you need to make sure that you're controlled, calorie controlled, as well as carbohydrate controlled. So sources of carbohydrate. So most people think of packaged foods, but carbohydrates in quite a lot of our foods, pretty much everything other than the animal proteins. So we've got grains, vegetables, fruit, dairy products, nuts, beans, and then of course the refined snacks and sweets, the things that we, the packaged goods and processed foods. So carbohydrate needs. So carbs are a little bit unique when it comes to how much we actually need. We recommend that people get 45 to 65% total calories. Well, I shouldn't say we recommend. The Dietary Guidelines recommend that you get 45 to 65% total calories. And so this is just, you can see on your screen, just an estimate of about how many grams that would be per day, depending on a calorie, 1,500 calorie diet or a 2,000 calorie diet. But the thing with carbohydrate is there's not a minimum of essential carbohydrate. So our bodies don't technically need to have carbohydrate in order to survive. But again, just because we can do it does not mean that it's optimal or practical. And so I'm sure some of you have seen in the media, there's a lot about a ketogenic diet, and we're not going to go into that here, but for most people, and getting below 50 grams of carbohydrate can result in ketosis, and this depends on a lot of factors, but this is just a generalization. And basically that your body is relying on ketones instead of glucose to provide your body with energy. The research in ketosis and ketogenic diets is still really preliminary, so there's not a whole lot that I can say here. It may be useful in therapeutic applications, but we still just don't know enough, so we can't really say much here. The other thing is that they've even shown that carbs just less than 100 grams, which is a significant jump from the 50 grams, still may result in undesirable consequences. As I mentioned, a lot of the nutritious foods do have carbohydrates in them. So if we're limiting fruits and vegetables, whole grains, dairy, we may be missing out on certain vitamins and minerals that are really good for us. The other thing is that if you're not getting enough carbohydrate, your body can actually break down protein if you're not consuming enough protein either. And that means it can actually pull from your muscle stores. Finally, you may require supplements if you're not giving yourself enough carbohydrate. You may need to supplement with fiber as well as different vitamins and minerals. And lastly, and I think probably most importantly, is the practicality of it. Being on a very low or no carbohydrate diet is really not practical for most people. So the health effects of carbs. So if you are going to choose carbohydrate foods, we really want you to choose the nutrient-dense carbs. And that means those that are rich in fiber, like vegetables and fruits and whole grains, because fiber has so many benefits. And also those carbs that are high in vitamins and minerals. We want to limit the nutrient-poor carbs, so those that have not as much nutrition, the fried foods, the packaged goods, and this is mostly because these are easy to overconsume, and again, we'll overdo our calories, and that can lead to weight gain. And also because they're going to displace some of those important nutrients that we would be getting from the nutrient-dense carbs. So fat. Let's talk about fat. So fat I call the armor because it's basically sort of the cushion. It provides structure and cushion to our cells, and it's essential to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So like protein, there's non-essential and essential fatty acids. So the essential fatty acids are alpha-linolenic and linoleic fatty acids, and these are ones that we absolutely have to get from the diet, because if we don't, then we can have some deficiencies show up. And the thing with fats is that there's different types. So fats can be saturated or unsaturated. They can be, if you've heard about trans fats, so the opposite of trans fats is cis, and that's what most of the fats are. That's sort of their orientation. I don't want to get too scientific, but cis would be the majority of fats are going to be those. And then there's also different lengths of fat as well. What's probably more important for you to focus on is the types of fat. So triglycerides are around 95% of the fats that we consume in solid fats and in oils are triglycerides. And we also consume steroids, and don't think it's not the kind of steroid you think, it's just the classification of it. Cholesterol is a steroid. So cholesterol is another type of fat that we consume. So sources of fat. So fat's pretty much oils, solid fat, but it's also found in meat and seafood, if you're eating a whole egg or full-fat dairy, nuts and seeds, as well as refined snacks and sweets, just like the carbohydrates. And how much fat do we need? So this, again, is something that is essential, so we do need to make sure we get enough fat. And we want to get 25 to 35% from our total calories. And of that, we want to choose mostly the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated fats, and to limit the saturated and trans fats. So I wanted to break up the fat sort of in like a stoplight fashion to kind of help you out. So trans fats are actually naturally found in certain products, beef, lamb, whole milk, cream, and then butter derived from ruminant animals. But for the most part, most of us, the trans fats we would be consuming are from hydrogenated products. And so that's in many packaged goods. It used to be in most peanut butters, where the liquid oil is converted into a solid fat. And we now know that there are a lot of health concerns with trans fats. It can increase our LDL cholesterol, which is the lousy cholesterol, the one we don't want to be high. It'll decrease our HDL cholesterol. It can induce inflammation, increase risk for chronic disease, and there really is no known safe level of consumption of trans fats. A 2006 study from Harvard actually showed that for every 2% calories from trans fat that we consume daily, the heart disease risk was increased by 23%. So that's huge. So trans fats are definitely something, avoid them at all costs. Saturated fat. So this is one that I'm giving kind of the yellow light. It's found in fatty meats, cream, butter, cheese, as well as some solid oils like palm oil and coconut oil. With saturated fats, it can increase your bad cholesterol and your total cholesterol, but on its own, it does not cause heart disease. However, what we do know is that it can be consumed within a healthy, balanced diet, but we want to just cut back. Replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat can reduce the risk of heart disease. So it's okay to have saturated fat in the diet. We just want to limit it and choose more unsaturated fats. And those are the ones that I give the green light on. This is found in many oils as well as many whole foods. The monounsaturated fats, and a lot of fats I will say contain both, so I'm just showing you which ones are high. It doesn't mean they don't contain the other type of fat. But olive oil, canola oil, avocados, those are going to be high in monounsaturated fats. And then your high polyunsaturated fats are going to be your omega-3s, so salmon, walnuts, flax seeds, sardines, and then even things like safflower oil. The benefits of unsaturated fat are many. They actually can help reduce your triglycerides and improve your cholesterol profile, so much better than the other two types of fats we talked about. And this may in turn prevent against heart disease and stroke. So finally, we're going to talk about micronutrients. So we just discussed the macronutrients, the fat, carbs, and protein, and micronutrients are the support system. So these are the components that help support overall health and play an important role in many of our body's functions. And these are classified as vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. So the sources of micronutrients, really they're found in a variety of foods, and the key here really is variety. You want to choose mostly whole foods that are from each food group and come in all different colors. And fruits and vegetables are probably the #1 source of these, but you can definitely get a lot of the micronutrients in other food groups as well. So what are the health effects? Vitamins help with energy production, wound healing, bone formation, immunity, as well as eye and skin health. So they're involved in quite a few of our body's reactions. And so are minerals. Minerals help maintain cardiovascular health. They provide structure to the skeleton, and they're also involved in a lot of our body's reactions. Phytochemicals are one of those that people are often confused on. Basically, they're plant-based compounds that have a health benefit that are not classified as a vitamin or mineral. So they offer some sort of benefit, but they're just a different class of nutrients. And the most common I put here, and in parentheses you'll see that the different things that they help with are things like beta-carotene, lycopene, that's what makes tomatoes red, lutein, resveratrol, that's what you find in wine, that's why that nutrient's gotten quite a bit of attention, anthocyanidins, and isoflavones. So when it comes to the phytochemicals, well, and really all of these, it's most important to get these, to consume these nutrients from whole foods as opposed to supplements. And this is especially true for the phytochemicals because the research on these individual ingredients is still really preliminary, and it doesn't, so far a lot of them haven't shown as much benefit as a supplement as they do when they're found in the whole food. So really we want to promote the whole food. And I think at this point I'm going to switch it over to Julie. Oh, 1 second. All right. Oh, do we have you there, Julie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. It's never good when you have to kick your boss out of her office so you can use her computer. So, moving on. So, Jamila has covered a lot of different things, but do you really know what you're eating? And how do you, and Chad, and how do you figure out what you're eating from a specific food? I mean, so what do you do? And the answer would be a label reader. So it really is the first thing to look at when you're dealing with processed foods, because it's great to know all this information in your head, but how do you get it into the real world? And when you look at one of the labels, when you look at a box of food or a can of food, look at the nutrition facts label. Don't look at the front of the label first, because the front is all marketing. It tells you all the reasons why you need to buy that food, why it's so much better than the other person's food. So do look at the labels and compare them, because the fronts are catchy, but the really important information is in the nutrition facts label. Okay, next one, please, Jamila. So this is going to be the new label that comes out. It's all manufacturers by mid-July, and by July 2018, the big manufacturers are going to have to convert to the new food label. And it's a lot catchier, and there's been some changes in it. So one of the big changes that you'll see in this is it shows calories and serving size a lot bigger labels. Some of the nutrients have changed. Some of the required ones are still on there. So we still have calcium and iron will be included, but they're adding vitamin D and potassium because those are nutrients of concern. And it's no longer going to be required that vitamin A and C are going to be on there. People used to be more deficient in A and C, and now that's not so much of a problem. So they're not going to be listed anymore. But one of the biggest things you'll also notice is they're going to break down some of the like carbohydrates
whether or not it's now you'll see dietary fiber and total sugars, but the new label is going to have a really important addition, which is added sugars. So you can determine if your food has naturally occurring sugars, which lots of foods have naturally occurring sugars. Think of milk has naturally occurring sugar, but as opposed to chocolate milk, which would have added sugar. So the new label will help people have more information on the diet. And one of the things that is going to change also is the fat. It's also going to mention, Jamila was talking about the different types of fats, the percentages, and so the new label is going to be more specific about the percentages to help people add them up. And with the label, and this is for the general population, so you may or may not have just different needs. But this is a really good starting place, and so you'll start to see this filter into the food system. But do read, no matter which kind, make sure that you do read labels and find out what's specific to you. There's nothing worse than eating a package of something and realizing that what you thought was a package of 200 calories actually had 2 servings in it. All right, next one, please. So something to consider also is not only having foods, reading your food labels, is eating more of foods that aren't labeled. So these are going to be our fresher choices. And I love the picture that's down in the bottom, which is to remind you that maybe you want to get your kids involved in gardening, or get them involved in choosing foods, and that will help involve them in eating our healthy foods when they get to choose it. So base your plate around these healthier choices. But my question to you is, so where do you find your information about the nutritional information on foods without labels? So where do you look? Please text that in. So a really good place to look is a really good place is the nutrient database. Yes, looking on, somebody put online. Somebody put MyFitnessPal. The interesting thing about MyFitnessPal is some of them are community-based information. So I could put in whatever, I could put something in and it may or may not be correct. So a really good place to start is the nutrient database, the USDA nutrient database. And so we've got the links there, and you can get that from the handout, and there's going to be 2 main tabs up there. One says food search and one says nutrients list. And so with the food search, you can search for a particular food, and with the nutrients list, it'll allow you to look up, if you are looking for particular nutrients in a food, you can look up to 3 different nutrients in similar products. And so let's go to the next one. Where you'll see you can get 2 different views from the database for a food. And this is for just a raw apple. So there's the basic report, and the basic report is, you can print off a PDF of it, and it's about 1.5 pages, and it'll tell you a lot of really good information. Or then there's the full report, which is also printable. The next slide, please. And so the next slide has what the full report's going to look like. Actually, I only put 6 of the 7 pages on there because it only fit. But it's huge. And this goes back to maybe some of our information overload. It has probably more than you ever really wanted to know about what was in your food. But if you are looking for very specific things, the full report can help. So all of this information goes into, does Diane put, does the database include processed foods? Yes, it includes some. So really for processed foods, you're probably going to get, you're going to get your major specific information from the label, but you can find some of the things are in there by manufacturers, some aren't. It's a really a large database, but considering how huge our food system is, it may not have everything, but it does give you some really good information on processed, but especially fresh. So we've talked a lot about what goes into your food. So how do you go about planning your plate? How do you, we've got the macronutrients, the micronutrients, we have label readings, and just remember, as Jamila said, there, no one perfect recommendation for everyone. There's no perfect way to eat. A lot of it's personal preference. Also our habits. My big one, which is time constraints, but also cooking skills. So all these go into planning your plate. And so to think about what's going to be on your plate, the next slide please, is to think more visually. So you want to look for colorful foods because our colorful foods are going to have more nutrients, more of those micronutrients, different kinds of the flavonoids, antioxidants, different nutrients in them. It's also going to be more attractive. If you sit and look at a plate of brown food, not only is it not going to necessarily be the most nutritious, it's pretty uninspiring to eat. And so, because this will, if you think about it visually, it is going to help you maybe simplify your meals. And portions are important. And so think about for a while maybe checking the portions within your bowls, your particular bowls and plates. And so you know about how much it is. And then I'll give you a better way to eyeball the amount of food. On the next one, Jamila mentioned earlier about the dietary guidelines. Great place to figure out. And this is really a really nice graphic to help us think about what we're going to eat and how much. And we have an archived webinar that will go in more detail, the link's there. But to think about your plate with half of it fruits and vegetables, a little bit more than half of that half vegetables, another quarter grains, preferably whole grain, and another quarter or slightly less of protein. And grains are part of our carbohydrates, protein, as Jamila mentioned. Lots of different foods go into the protein group. And then the dietary guidelines also do have some recommendations for not just the general healthy eating plan, but also if you choose to eat a Mediterranean style, but also a healthy vegetarian diet. And going into all these information, the next slide please, for the whole healthy eating plan to think of it as a whole basic way of eating. And no one's perfect, but a general healthy eating plan is going to help you reduce your risk of chronic disease and help you meet your calorie levels. And on the choosemyplate.gov website, it will help you determine your recommended calorie level for your age, sex, and activity level. And to focus on meeting your nutritional needs with foods first. And that they're adaptable to what you like and what your skills are, and it's maintainable. These are achievable. These are the things that you can do to eat healthier. It doesn't, it's not restrictive. Yes, you do need to make choices, but it's not restrictive. And so, next slide, please. And so what we're thinking about this is that decision. Should we eat food or should we supplements? Food contains really important components besides just some of them, those macronutrients. It has phytonutrients, antioxidants, fiber, dietary fats that you can't get in a supplement. And so if you're going to supplement, it's certainly a topic for you and your healthcare provider. And sometimes people say, well, it's just a little supplement. What could be wrong with taking that one little extra pill? Then I'm sure. Well, that may depend on your specific diet, but also chronic conditions that you have, but also other supplements you may be taking. And some of these things may react with your medications. So that little extra pill can have adverse effects on your health, which is why it's really important to have this discussion with your health care provider. Also, they can also just have an adverse effect on your wallet by the fact that you're now spending more money on supplements than you actually need. And something else that people often don't think about is there are upper limits on most vitamins and minerals. So some of them, especially the fat-soluble ones, will stay in your body, and the water-soluble ones you'll excrete, but there are upper limits. There's only so much that our bodies can take of certain ones. But people who have certain dietary restrictions, such as people with celiac disease or lactose intolerance, they may have trouble getting the right amount of nutrients, so they probably need to supplement. And certainly at different stages of life, sometimes if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or older adults may also benefit. And vegetarians and vegans have a lot of trouble sometimes getting vitamin B12, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and zinc. So they may need to supplements. Next one, please. Okay, so dietary supplements. they don't prevent disease. There's no, we're all looking for that magic pill that's going to make us incredibly healthy, make us live longer, and prevent disease. And certainly they don't. There's no such thing. But they may reduce your risk of some diseases. But do avoid mega doses, things that promise, over 100% of your daily requirements. And then beware of misleading claims and promises. Oh, take this, it'll do whatever. And it's all natural, because if it's all natural, it can't be bad. Natural doesn't necessarily mean safe. It just means it's naturally derived. And do be aware of the potential interactions with medications you may take or with other supplements. And you may need to time You may need to time both your medications and your supplements, that they may interact with each other. So really good to get the information on it before you supplement. And then a final thought is be a wise consumer for all your nutrition information. A lot of times people get their information what we call Dr. Google. You just put it in the computer and it magically tells you what to eat. And if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. Or if your next door neighbor takes it, it's got to be true. Do look for research-based information from good sources. Jamila talked about it at the beginning, but look for things to look for. If you put something in a computer and the first 5 pages are all people trying to sell you that product, probably not necessarily one of the things that's been overly research-based. So look for things from extension. Look for things when you're putting stuff in your search engine. Put university, put gov, so that you're filtering out some of the things. The FDA has got some really great information. There's 2 good fact sheets from the FDA in your supplement information. So just because somebody's written a book and it's #1 on the book list doesn't mean it's actually good science, that it's workable, and that you can, that it will fit into your diet. And finally, there's so much information out there, and it's really easy to get bogged down in the minutiae. It's like, I've got to have this exact many percentages. I have to have this many carbs. I have to have this many such and such. Don't get bogged down into the minutiae. Understand the building blocks of nutrition, that the importance of protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and make wise choices most of the time to get the most from your calories. And think about looking at it visually, and that your plate should be colorful. You should have that half fruits and vegetables, that quarter grains, quarter protein. Make sure you get your calcium through dairy products or calcium fortified foods. Label reading or getting information from the right sources online can really help you with your decision making. Eat more fresh. The fresher it is, obviously the less processed it is. So anytime you process, there's going to be additions. And overall, just be a wise consumer of both your consumption of your food and of your information. And with that, let's check out also later today we'll be sending you out a very short evaluation, so please do complete it and send it back. If not, we will be sending you reminders. And let's see, do we have any questions? Do we have any questions that I missed, Jamila?
It looks like Wendy just sent me. There was a message on omega-3s that I missed over, or a question on omega-3s. So hold on, let me find it. Okay, so I've read that you should maximize omega-3s and minimize omega-6s. So the thing with that is really that omega-6s are found in so many of our foods that they're very easy to get. So you don't really need to actively seek out omega-6s. Omega-3s are a lot harder to get into our diet. So those are going to be the foods that you want to have. Now, if you're not getting enough of omega-3 and omega-6, both of those are essential fatty acids, so you're not going to be having enough balanced nutrition. So someone said omega-6 can cause inflammation. Not that I'm aware of. that would be something I'd have to look into.
I know the American Heart Association has been several years ago, but they had released a study that that reducing the omega-6 fatty acids in our diets may increase the risk for heart disease. And also there was a study by NIH that discussed the omega-6 versus omega-3 and what the ratio should be if you're looking into it that detailed.
Yeah, from my understanding, I think it's mostly it's just like with amino acids. If you're overdoing it on one thing, you're going to have adverse effects. So because omega-6s are so prevalent in the diet, you're better off actively seeking out omega-3s and just knowing your omega-6s will just be in the diet with the fatty foods that you're consuming, because you really do need to have some sort of balance.
And somebody else put a question about, can supplements help joint pain as claimed? There hasn't been a lot of great research on it. There has been some information related to, and I'm sure you're thinking, I'm assuming you're thinking about chondroitin and glucosamine, and they have worked for some people, although that hasn't been really definitively backed, research-based. But one of the things to think about with that one is that if you take them and they work great, and if you take them and you don't see any improvement within 6 months, discontinue them, because they do seem to help some people, but not everyone. Any more questions?
Okay, so I got one too. It was sent to me privately. So someone asked me, what has trans fats? Every label I've read on packaged food always says 0 trans fat. So I'm just going to go back to that slide. This might take a few minutes. So legally, if it has less than 0.5 gram of trans fat, they can put 0 on the label. Where is it? Here we go. So some of the foods that will naturally have them are fatty cuts of beef, lamb. Whole milk has a little bit of trans fats, some cream, butter. Really any whole fat dairy is going to have some amount of trans fats naturally. It's very, very minimal, but it is there. Really, most of the trans fat is going to be found in any hydrogenated oil. So how you can look and see if that's even in your food is, don't look at the label where it says trans fat equals 0. Look at the ingredient statement. And if the ingredient statement says hydrogenated anywhere, and that's that word right there on the screen, then you know it has some trans fats. And if you eat more than 1 serving, then you potentially could be eating, 1 serving. If, like I said, if it's less than 0.5 gram, they can put 0. So if you eat 4 servings and it's at 0.4 grams, you've already gotten almost 2 grams of trans fats. So it's just looking at the ingredient statement and trying to avoid those products.
And there's another question on the benefits of turmeric. I believe that's also kind of an ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah, the research is still kind of out on turmeric. Are supplements regulated in the claims they make? No. Unfortunately, supplements are not regulated the way that food is, especially when it comes to the marketing. So you really have to do your due diligence and talk with your healthcare provider, as well as looking into the companies that are actually producing the supplement and making sure that you're buying from reputable companies. One thing that you can look for is a third-party seal. You'll see it's a little circle that'll have it'll either say USP or, Julie, do you remember the other one? The other third?
I knew you were going to ask me that because I couldn't remember it either. It's like there's something pharmacological. Oh, there's 2 of them.
USP. Yeah, there's 2 third-party companies, or not organizations, I should say, that evaluate the safety and the efficacy of those supplements. And so they can, if that's on there, then you know at least what's in the product is what they say is in the product, but it does not mean that the claim they're making is accurate. So it's still something you want to definitely discuss with a healthcare provider.
right? Because you can't make false claims, but what they do is they kind of dance around it.
Yes.
They dance around it. So the FDA doesn't regulate supplements, but they will look like, if there's one that says, reduces blood pressure or whatever, that's a false claim. And so that would be regulated. But there's lots of dancing when it comes to, along with that, trying, all that marketing to make you buy it. I think that it's going to help you. And if you do take some wrong ones, depending on your particular problem, they can certainly cause more harm than good.
Yep. Okay, so we received a private question too. Someone asked, are frozen fruits and vegetables just as healthy as fresh varieties? And I would say yes. Typically what I tell people is when it's in season, buy fresh, because a lot of times it tastes better. The texture is usually better. But if not, or if you want to have a more cost-effective option, then frozen fruits and vegetables are equally as good. Just make sure that when you are looking at the package, it's just the fruit or vegetable. It doesn't have added sauces or sweeteners or that sort of thing. But otherwise, they're equally as good. So we did get a question too on how sweeteners affect our body. I would like to refer you to our YouTube channel. We did an entire webinar on this. That would be way too much to answer in just a brief question. And I believe we're out of time, so
and we can send out, we'll send out the link to the sweetener video when we send out the evaluation.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar, and be on the lookout for future ones. We do have one next month, and really every month for the remainder of the year. So at least that we're planning.
All right. Well, thank you everyone, and we will see you next month and hopefully next week for Spring Clean Your Finances.